starting with some of my personal experiences with marijuana in my family is I remember growing up as a little girl. I remember my mom was ill. She had a lot of seizures, and so my older siblings were left to care for us younger children then. And we did come from a blended family. I can remember my older sister and older brothers, they would often use marijuana, and it did start with marijuana. And I remember when they finally got up and out of the house, I didn't become aware of it when we were, 6, 7, like that. And they were, in the age they were quite a few years, older than me. But when we would leave and go visit them at their place, I remember that everything was centered around their tray, their paraphernalia, their joint paper, the weed, what they would call cleaning the seats in the trays. And I remember that they were very, I would say that they were not alert. My sister was never really alert. And I remember that she had a great dependency on it, and everything revolved around her having her marijuana in the morning or not. I remember that I would see some of my nieces and my nephews, sometimes there were things that they needed in regards to a stable, nurturing environment that they were receiving, because the marijuana always took precedent over their daily routines, engagement, and life skills. I remember that. It used to break my heart. My sister would use regular, and her ex-husband would use regularly. Not only that, but I remember that because their use had attracted a lot of extended families, and they would all use together. My nephews struggled greatly. Some of them did academically. There were things that they, like I said, went without, and a lot of arguing. Sometimes she would just be checked out completely. The last thing that I remember about my sister, fast forward, is that from the years of marijuana use and seeing like her teeth and stuff like that, it was just the discoloration. I would hear her coughing and hacking, and she would always like just grab her chest like it hurt so bad. And I remember she used to smoke it regularly, and I can remember that ultimately she ended up getting, I believe it was asthma, and she ended up in the hospital. And I remember that she was a chronic marijuana user, and I remembered that because I would be there, and I'd always tell her to put it away and don't smoke that, as a child, because of all the education that my own mom and, school and stuff had given me in regards to the dangers long term of marijuana. When we were in the hospital, the only thing that I could remember that traumatized me is knowing what my sister did to get to the hospital when they had a tube in her throat, one in her mouth. She had the oxygen, and they had a pump on her that was pumping her lungs and fluids off of her lungs, and they did mark her as a chronic marijuana user. And I remember the medical intern had some students there, and I remember hearing him telling them that they were pulling things off of my sister's lungs that they've never seen. It was so bad, it was so thick, it was just, I don't know the medical term, but
was it like a fungus?
It was almost like a fungus, and with all the body stuff in the pump that was pulling out of her system. And I remember going in, and I said, if I'm going to go in and talk to my sister, you got to give me good news, because she's going to know my voice, and she's going to come too, and is she ever going to be able to come off of these tubes? And it just angered me so much, because while she was smoking it and having the high and having what she said, relaxation, and being able to maintain her life, and stress and anxiety, the long-term effect was that she died at 44 years old. And I went in there and I can remember all the tubes in her, and she heard my voice, and all I seen was tears running down her eyes when she was on the ventilator. And I knew and she knew, and I was angry at anybody that ever gave it to her or sold it to her or she used with. I was so angry because that is what she used her whole life. And as you know, 44, and then so she finally made it off the tubes quite a few days later, but her lungs were so raw and poisoned and just medically gone. They had her on oxygen, and then it wasn't but just maybe 2 weeks, I believe, later, and I got a call from my nephews that my sister, their mom, had passed away in the morning. So she didn't make it. So that's just one of my testimonies in regards to, you know, the marijuana use, and this was some years back. And fast forward, I have a daughter, and she to this day tells me that her first use was marijuana, and she remembers the high that she had from it. She remembers how she felt like just everything just got different for her, and it just like totally captured her mind and her mood and the way she responded to things, the way she just kind of isolated. And from there she said that she began wondering what other highs would be like. And we went through quite a journey with her in regards to other things, and glad to say she's come out now, but it's taken thousands of dollars, lots of networking, lots of support, lots of friends, a fight that you never want to go into. And if I can do anything in this world to keep people from using marijuana or even starting the use of marijuana, then I would do that. The fight is not worth it. That is my story, and there's several, but those are the most devastating ones that I remember, and I don't want nobody else to go through what I went through.
So you're saying marijuana was your daughter's gateway drug, and it affected her mind in a way that you saw it change her mind to make her something she's not. Yeah.
These are things that she voiced to me.
Yeah.
After the fog cleared, as she said, and she remembers using it. One of the things that was really interesting to me that she shared after she used is she felt that maybe she was allergic to marijuana, because she said that every time and when she used it, whoever she was using it with solely, she would get paranoid and she would have anxiety and fear, and she couldn't shake the feeling. And I know that was one of her biggest things, that her body wasn't being cooperative with her and working in the way when she was not on it. So she said that that would cause her to try to self-medicate in other ways to try to get away from it.
Yeah.
So yes.
And then you're a social worker.
I am a social worker.
And you work with children.
I do work with children.
And do you see, I know you probably see all drugs affect the children and the families you work with, but do you see marijuana affect those families too?
So some of the things as a social worker in child welfare that we're experiencing now is how to deal and how to, I guess, I don't know, lack of better words, parallel ourselves with what, you know, has been deemed as legalized now, recreational, medical, whatever you want to call it, is that there are no regulations in the homes and the families to the people that want to use and have small children. It's almost like a violence, like they want to use, but they don't want to, once they use, it's almost like they don't want to deal with, you know, having to deal with the needs and the life skills engagement of their children. It's almost priority sometimes, and the things that we're finding ourselves trying to provide them with lock boxes to keep the marijuana away from them, and, you know, trying to tailor when and where they use it, you know, in regards and how much they have and where they're leaving it around. There's no way that we can be in every home that has young children in this household, and is very naive to the hallucinogenic piece of the marijuana and the psychosis that goes on with it. And some of the children that are suffering the harm that they suffer, it's a hard job. I mean, what if somebody warmed a bottle up, and that's good, they warmed a bottle for their baby. What if they forgot to test the warmth of the bottle and say they burn esophagus? I mean, there's a lot of things that go on that there's just no excuse. The overdoses, and I don't believe that we've ever been able to release the data that we have on that.
With marijuana overdoses? You see it. And so you're saying that the parents you work with are not keeping the marijuana away from the children. So you're trying to teach them to keep the marijuana away from the children.
Doing education.
And you're trying to teach them not to use in front of their children. And that's a very hard road to navigate.
Very.
And because are the parents like self-entitled, like it's just marijuana, I have the right to use, or do they see that it's harming their children?
I do believe they minimize it because, I mean, you know, it's the order of chain of command. If it's legalized through the government and through the state, in their mind, they're not doing any harm. And I don't think there is no regulations that are handed out with the dispensaries. I don't think there's no warning signs, even at the very least, you know. A lot of the things is the teens going in and they say they card an ID, and there's a lot of children and people that are going in and getting through the cracks on that.
Yeah. So what is your message to other states and pretty much our country about the legalization of marijuana? Is it a positive thing? Do you support it? Or what do you think of it?
I think the biggest thing I would say is check Pueblo, Colorado and Colorado Springs truancy courts. You'll see they're at their all-time high. And some of the biggest barriers that we are coming up against is the use of marijuana. It's point blank marijuana, and the lack, the inhibition, no desire to pursue what they once pursued, sports, goals. It's become a circle of friends that like the marijuana, or even with their parents, just to negotiate their level of use. So I would say, if you care about your future, your environment, and your children, your social services, your community resources, I would tell you, I would urge you strongly not to fall into any politicians, any pressure from anybody. Put your feet to the ground, put your feet to the fire, and stand up and keep things the way that they were made, sober, clean, and just understand that you're dealing with something that is going to be bigger. It's like pushing the ocean back with a broom.